In this unit, we're going to focus on category strategy, which is a core concept in modern purchasing and supply management. Rather than buying items one transaction at a time, category strategy asks a much bigger question. How should we manage entire groups of related products or services in a way that supports the firm's overall strategy? Here, the word category is essentially interchangeable with commodity. It refers to a logical grouping of items or services that share similar supply markets, cost drivers, risks, or strategic importance. Category strategy is about making intentional, long-term decisions about how those categories are sourced, managed, and improved over time. By the end of this unit, there are 3 key things you should be able to do. First, you should be able to describe the elements of a category strategy, what goes into it, and why it matters. Second, you should understand the category strategy development process, meaning the structured steps organizations use to analyze spending, evaluate suppliers, and build an effective strategy. Third, you should be able to identify different types of category strategy outcomes, including cost, risk, quality, innovation, and resilience outcomes. Keep these 3 objectives in mind as we move through the unit. They provide the roadmap for everything that follows. Category strategies are closely tied to sourcing strategies. At their core, they answer a fundamental question. How should we purchase commodities in a way that supports higher-level business strategies? Instead of focusing only on price, category strategies align purchasing decisions with broader goals such as cost leadership, innovation, supply chain resilience, sustainability, and quality improvement. This shift is important because procurement is no longer just a transactional function. It's a strategic lever that can directly influence firm performance. Category strategies are driven by clearly defined goals, and these goals can vary widely depending on business priorities. For example, a cost reduction objective might aim to make the firm the low-cost producer in its industry with a concrete goal such as reducing raw material costs by 15% in 1 year or lowering inventory levels to improve working capital. A technology or new product development objective may involve outsourcing non-core activities, qualifying new suppliers, or integrating suppliers into product development efforts. Some firms pursue supply-based reduction objectives, such as reducing the number of suppliers or simplifying product designs to unlock cost savings. Others focus on supply chain resilience, ensuring uninterrupted supply by identifying backup or domestic suppliers in case of disruptions. Finally, quality objectives may target measurable improvements, such as reducing defect rates across all incoming materials. The key point is that category strategy goals are specific, measurable, and tied directly to business outcomes. Category strategy is not a single action. It's a sequence of coordinated activities. It starts with understanding business unit requirements, followed by researching supply market characteristics and supplier capabilities. Firms then evaluate suppliers that best align with those needs and collaborate with key stakeholders to design a strategy that matches supply capability with demand requirements. From there, organizations determine optimal relationship structures, build a business case, develop negotiation and contract strategies, execute agreements, and establish mechanisms for continuous improvement. This makes category strategy both analytical and relational. It requires data, but also collaboration. It's important to distinguish between strategic sourcing and category management. Strategic sourcing is often event-based, focused on competitive bidding and supplier selection at a point in time. Category management, on the other hand, is an ongoing effort. When procurement operates as a service provider, category management becomes its primary service line. Value creation goes beyond price savings to include risk reduction, innovation, supplier development, and performance improvement. A key starting point for category management is company-wide spend analysis, which helps build the business case for managing categories more strategically. Spend analysis answers some very basic but very powerful questions. What did the business actually spend money on over the past year? Which suppliers received the majority of that spend? Were prices accurate? Did spending align with budgets across divisions? Spend analysis also supports compliance requirements such as Sarbanes-Oxley, identifies opportunities to consolidate volume across business units, and highlights inefficiencies or inconsistencies in purchasing behavior. Without this visibility, effective category strategy simply isn't possible. In this example, we're looking at a basic spend analysis that breaks total organizational spend into categories and shows the relative share of each category. The horizontal axis lists our major spend categories, things like rebate fulfillment, advertising, general contracting, hardware, investments, paper, service parts, business services, contract labor, and telecommunications. The vertical axis shows the proportion of total spend, so each bar represents how much of our overall purchasing budget is going to that category. What immediately stands out is that spend is not evenly distributed. A small number of categories account for a disproportionately large share of total spend. For example, rebate, fulfillment, and advertising are the two largest categories, each representing roughly 14% of total spend. Together, those two categories alone account for nearly 30% of all organizational purchasing. As we move further to the right, we see a long tail of smaller categories such as paper, service parts, business services, contract labor, and telecommunications. Individually, each of these represents a relatively small share, but collectively, they still matter. This pattern, a few large categories and many smaller ones, is very typical in spend analysis and is often referred to as a Pareto-like distribution. From a procurement and supply management perspective, this visualization helps us prioritize effort. High spend categories like rebate fulfillment and advertising are prime candidates for strategic sourcing, supplier negotiations, contract consolidation, or performance management, because even small percentage improvements can yield significant dollar savings. Mid-tier categories may benefit from standardized contracts or category management, while lower spend categories might be managed through catalogs, purchasing cards, or simplified procurement processes to reduce administrative cost rather than unit price. In short, this spend analysis helps decision-makers focus attention where it will have the greatest impact, aligning sourcing strategy, governance, and effort with where the money is actually being spent. Despite its importance, spend analysis is not easy. Organizations often struggle with inaccurate or delayed data, inconsistent accounting systems, different recording procedures, and complications caused by mergers and acquisitions. Translating data across systems is particularly challenging. These challenges explain why spend visibility remains a competitive advantage for firms that get it right. Category strategy development follows a structured multi-step process. It begins with team formation and charter development, followed by market intelligence research, strategy development, supplier evaluation, contract negotiation, and supplier relationship management. Each step builds on the previous one, creating a coherent and defensible strategy. The first step is organizational. Firms define the scope of the category strategy, identify key stakeholders and subject matter experts, assign a capable project leader, and develop a communication plan. The project charter outlines the burning platform that justifies the effort, such as cost savings, risk exposure, or value creation, and clarifies what success looks like for different stakeholders. Stakeholder mapping helps assess who is affected by the strategy and how likely they are to support or resist change. It can be seen as a process involving identifying and naming each stakeholder, noting the degree to which they are ready for change, their capability for that change, the power to make change happen, identifying factors that will help or hinder that change, and identifying stakeholders and factors you need to work with to make that change happen. Stakeholders are evaluated based on readiness for change, capability for change, and power to influence outcomes. Understanding these dynamics is critical for gaining alignment and avoiding implementation failure. Once the team is in place, attention shifts to the second step, which focuses on the supply market. This includes conducting detailed spend analysis, researching suppliers, triangulating data from multiple sources, and applying tools such as Porter's 5 Forces and SWOT analysis. The goal is to understand both supply dynamics and competitive positioning. Porter's 5 Forces model helps assess supplier power, buyer power, threat of substitutes, threat of new entrants, and competitive rivalry. Applied to sourcing, it helps firms anticipate pricing pressure, switching costs, and supply risk. SWOT analysis complements 5 Forces by highlighting internal strengths and weaknesses alongside external opportunities and threats, especially when data is limited. Supplier analysis dives deeper into individual suppliers, evaluating cost structures, financial health, customer satisfaction, capabilities, strategic direction, and cultural fit. This analysis helps determine which suppliers should be developed, retained, or replaced. Firms use industry benchmarks, RFIs, and value chain analysis to identify best practices and cost-saving opportunities across the supply chain. The third step involves strategy development. Strategy development involves portfolio analysis and supplier segmentation. Purchases are categorized based on strategic impact, and suppliers are grouped based on spend importance and attractiveness of the buyer to the supplier. A common tool in portfolio analysis is the Kraljic framework. The Kraljic framework, or matrix, is a 1983 procurement tool developed by Peter Kraljic that categorizes supply items into 4 quadrants: strategic, leverage, bottleneck, and non-critical, based on profit impact and supply risk. It enables purchasing professionals to tailor strategies to maximize profitability, reduce risk, and optimize supplier relationships. Key quadrants and strategies include strategic items, high risk, high profit, which focuses on long-term partnerships, collaboration, and creating competitive advantage. Leverage items, low risk, high profit, which focuses on competitive bidding, exploiting buying power, and finding the best price. Bottleneck items, high risk, low profit, which focuses on ensuring volume, reducing risk, and managing supply continuity. And finally, non-critical items, low risk, low profit, which focuses on simplifying processes, reducing administrative costs, and automation. An often overlooked issue is how suppliers view the buyer. Step 4 includes an understanding of, does the supplier believe that the category under review creates value for its business? For example, suppliers may see the buyer as core developmental, where the supplier has a low historical business volume with the buyer; exploitable, where the supplier has a large portion of the buyer's spend but does not view the buyer as an important customer; or a nuisance, where the supplier does not view the buyer as important. These perceptions influence supplier behavior and performance. Firms will add suppliers who are not currently in the top 80% of spend and develop them, whereas they may eliminate suppliers in the exploit and nuisance categories. Supplier scorecards are often used to evaluate alternative suppliers. This figure details an example of a supplier scorecard, where criteria including quality, on-time delivery, cost, customer support, and compliance are rated with different weighted scores. As you can see, quality is heavily emphasized, followed by on-time delivery and cost. With vendor A and vendor B receiving ratings for each criteria, an overall weighted score is provided, with vendor B coming up slightly ahead. Implementation requires clear tasks, timelines, accountability, and communication. Market and price analysis establish fair pricing, contingency plans manage risk, and contracts formalize agreements. Competitive bidding works best when specifications are clear and price dominates. Negotiation is preferred for complex, innovative, or uncertain purchases requiring collaboration. Organizations may pursue insourcing or outsourcing, supply-based optimization, and supply risk management depending on strategic priorities and market conditions. Insourcing and outsourcing are complex strategic decisions with long-term implications for cost, capability, and control. Organizations evaluate these choices based on several key factors, including the emergence of new technologies and products, alignment with core business competencies, current performance levels, shifts in demand, and the geographical location of customers. The goal is to determine whether activities are best performed internally to build strategic capability, or externally to increase flexibility, access expertise, and respond more effectively to changing market conditions. Supply-based optimization is the process of determining the appropriate number and mix of suppliers needed to effectively support the organization. Often described as right-sizing, it typically involves reducing the supply base to focus on fewer, more capable suppliers. This decision requires in-depth analysis of both current requirements and future demand to ensure supplier capacity, risk, and performance remain aligned with strategic objectives. Supply risk management focuses on identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks that arise from an increasingly global and outsourced supply base. Greater reliance on low-cost countries introduces exposure to operational disruptions, significant cost impacts, and price volatility. As a result, organizations increasingly rely on enterprise risk management (ERM) systems to monitor, anticipate, and respond to supply-related risks in a more structured and proactive way. Supply risk can arise from geopolitical events, labor disruptions, regulatory changes, weather, quality issues, and communication failures, highlighting the need for proactive risk management. Low-cost country sourcing can reduce costs, increase competition, and provide access to new technologies, but it also introduces complexity and risk. Challenges include logistics complexity, cultural differences, currency volatility, ethical concerns, and lack of experienced personnel. Finally, supplier development involves working directly with underperforming suppliers to improve capabilities, creating long-term value for both parties. In this unit, we focused on category strategy as a core capability in modern purchasing and supply management. Rather than treating procurement as a series of isolated transactions, category strategy takes a long-term, strategic view of how groups of related products and services should be managed. First, you learned how to describe the key elements of a category strategy. These include clearly defined goals, a deep understanding of business unit requirements, supply market analysis, supplier evaluation, relationship design, and continuous improvement. Together, these elements ensure that sourcing decisions are aligned with broader business strategy. Second, you gained an understanding of the category strategy development process. We walked through the structured steps organizations use, from building the team and project charter to conducting spend and market analysis, developing strategy using portfolio tools, evaluating suppliers, negotiating contracts, and managing supplier relationships over time. Finally, you learned to identify the different types of category strategy outcomes. These outcomes extend well beyond cost savings to include risk reduction, quality improvement, innovation, resilience, and long-term value creation across the supply base. Taken together, these learning objectives reinforce a central theme of the chapter. Effective category strategy transforms purchasing from a tactical function into a strategic driver of organizational performance. See you in the next unit!